What's up, everyone? Welcome to You're Such a Nerd, the Geek Variety podcast, coming at you with the speed of a geriatric beholder walking its displacer beast to the end of the last home for a plate of Otic spiced potatoes. I'm your host, Johnny Doe. Let's go. Welcome back to the show, everyone. If you're new, we have a Patreon. It's a very reasonable rate. It's linked in the show notes below wherever you're listening to this podcast. Get you access to the private Discord, additional episodes of the show, like Critics Corner, Hobby Hangouts, and ad-free episodes of the main feed because capitalism is stinky poo-poo. Other ways you can support the show if you like is rate, subscribe, and all that stuff on the platforms of your choice. Keep an eye out for websites, merch drop. That's going to be coming soon. And just, spread the word. It's all about word of mouth around here. It's this entire guerrilla marketing. No social media presence because we don't need to doom scroll anymore, do we? Let's be honest. And let's encourage humans to talk to humans. That would be pretty awesome. If you have any questions or want to contact me on something I screwed up, by all means, send us an email at younerdssuck@gmail.com. It's also in the links below. And last but not least, if you're so inclined, send me a postcard. The address is also down below in the show notes, and I'll send you one back. We'll support the Postal Service. We'll be pen pals. It'll be amazing. Also, I'd like to welcome to the Patreon our first patron. So it's a very lonely place over there. Kevin, baby, welcome. Kevin and I go way back, and you might actually be hearing from Kevin soon in an episode upcoming. Also of note is the music, the roll-in. It's by Abbey Music. Go check them out. They rock. It's a banger for sure. You don't know how many times I do these roll-ins, and I just totally lose myself bobbing my head to the tune, and it sticks with me forever because it's that just catchy. Anywho, without further ado, here's my conversation with my buddy Whit. Oh yeah, we're talking about D&D. Duh. That's the reason I have that stuff up there. And I was actually talking to my other buddy about this, Ash, that the trying to find the joy and stuff, like the nostalgia of the things that I used to own.
Yes, absolutely.
And having those like old school first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons books, the old 92 TSR cards, because I had those growing up. I had traded them with my buddy and everything. It's wild to me that there was a time when we looked at these things and we didn't think anything about it, right?
Right.
And so like my wife and I were down at a vintage thing recently, and like going in there and you're just seeing like Hot Wheels and like, the baseball things that were really popular back in like the 90s, like the toys, the figures,
right,
the Major League Baseball characters.
Major League Baseball figurines.
And like
the bobbleheads.
Yeah, G.I. Joe's, like all the stuff that, you grew up in the 80s and 90s with. And it's like people pay massive amounts of money for that now.
It's unreal to me. Because I remember crashing Matchbox cars together.
Totally. Yep.
That was like you smashed them together. In fact, I think Matchbox made some kind of Thunder Road or something, or some race wreck 100%. Where they crossed, and if you hit, they would hit and wreck. So and now of course some of those are probably pretty valuable.
Oh yeah, what it just did. I saw somebody, they had some from I don't know, like the 60s or 70s that were in package still.
Yeah,
and they were asking like
it's crazy,
a lot of money for them, and I'm like, it's the Hot Wheels, like Matchbox car, like I don't understand.
Right. I got them. I'm older,
sure.
And so I had some from the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
That were given to me, and so it's those things. That's why I'm always surprised actually that my D&D stuff, after all the downsizings and after having left some stuff at my parents' house way back when, and then getting it later, how none of the D&D stuff disappeared.
That's amazing.
I still have the original red box D&D set.
So cool.
I can remember going with my mother to buy it, and this was in the middle of the whole D&D, Satan's
Satanic
game
Panic
and
era,
Satanic Panic era in the 70s, but my mother was very cool about these sorts of things, and so she wasn't into any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And and she was my first DM. So
really?
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
That's amazing. There's a podcast I used to listen to back in the day called the D6 Generation, and they're not around anymore. They don't do any recording. They stopped everything, and they kind of came back in spurts, kind of doing like part-time things and everything, but they eventually just kind of were done. And one of the guys, Russ Wakelin, had daughters, and this was the crazy thing because I listened to that podcast for, gosh, I don't know, over a decade, but like longer than a decade. I listened to this podcast, and I remember when his kids were really small, like tiny, like toddlers and infants and stuff.
Yeah.
And he talked about trying to get them, and he would try to get them into board games because it was like board games and all that kind of stuff. Right. But then he got into D&D later, and he started playing D&D, and then he talked about like wanting to get his kids into D&D, and then one year he was trying to do like kids game sessions with his kid, and then like his kids and his friends wanted to do it, until you fast forward like a whole 10 years later, and he's still DMing for his like daughters when they come home from college because their friends want to run a D&D game, and he will DM for it. Like this is
that's the thing.
Years later,
when D&D kind of re-kicked back into the mainstream again, with all the Critical Role and all these other places, Stranger Things kind of kicked it back off. There was a lot of people who wanted to play, but they didn't have a lot. There weren't a lot of experienced DMs out there, and that's how I got kind of back into the DM side of it. Was some guys at work wanted to play, and they didn't know a DM. They're like, "Oh, we got to find somebody who can DM." I was like, "Hey guys, been doing this for 20 years. I've been running mini campaigns, so I would be happy to be a DM again."
Yeah, that's cool. So you said Critical Role, and I want to talk more about the D&D origins for you, but I want to probably touch on what is a bit of a hot take. Probably, you listen to the Critical Role series, right?
Yeah, I've listened. I've watched Critical Role. Yeah.
Okay, so I did watch the anime that they did with Amazon.
The second one, in my opinion, is better.
Which I don't remember what it's called.
The first one was the Vox Machina. The second one, the Mighty Nine. Actually, I think they're doing a better job of the animated series of the Mighty Nine.
Okay, cool. I haven't seen that one yet, so I'll give it a look. But so I watched the anime, and it was fine. Like I didn't realize at first that it was Critical Role, or else honestly, due to a very unreasonable bias that I have, I probably wouldn't have watched it. But so I hear you, and I agree with you that like Critical Role did a bunch of good things, I think, for role playing. One, obviously relaunched D&D, which coincided with Stranger Things and 5th edition coming out, which I think has been the most accessible D&D edition,
absolutely,
to date.
Absolutely.
But my issue with Critical Role is that because so many people, to your point, got exposed to D&D via Critical Role, they have a very perceived idea of how DMing and storytelling goes in a role-playing game, and I've found that there isn't the delineation between this is content creation for consumption via YouTube or audio cast, right? Versus this is an actual well-designed, well-narrated, well-run DM game, because there's so much dead time between character activities, right? Where like one character will be just sitting out for a long time in those experiences, right? And I got under some people who are big Critical Role gamers. I played some games with them, and I've just happened a couple times now where that was their like basis of comparison for what it was to DM, and that's how they DM'd, and it was tough to sit at that table because it's like it has literally been 45 minutes of you and this one person role playing a completely non-story advancing, arguably meaning-less grocery shopping encounter, and I'm all for the downbeats in the role playing, but it's kind of like
well, I mean, I've had campaigns where people have been way into shopping, and you have a whole shopping campaign, which is not what I'd intended when you start, but that's kind of the way it plays out. The Matthew Mercer effect, I think, is somewhat real, but I've got to say, the show itself, if you can separate it out, is entertaining. I enjoy Critical Role. Those guys are extremely talented. I mean, one of the things is, as a DM, you're not going to have professional voice actors typically as your players.
Yeah.
You're just not. And they know how to set up a story. They know they're actors. I mean, that's why they're so good at it. But, and I think a lot of people don't give Matt a lot of credit. They all say, oh, well, his characters are so good. I don't quite buy that. I think Matt's an excellent DM, and I don't know him,
sure,
or anything like that. I've never met
we're internet on the first name page with him.
Right. So it's just, but I think that he's for one thing, he's very good with rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big part of it. He's very good with rules, but he's not so inflexible that he won't bend it when he thinks it advances the story. I think he does a really good job of keeping the story in mind. He has a pretty clear idea of where he kind of wants it to end up, but he doesn't railroad track his characters.
Which is huge.
Yeah, which is absolutely huge. And that's one of the things that I think early playing D&D with back, a long time ago, it was really easy for that to happen. Totally. Especially like with the second edition and AD&D, that group, you could really railroad track an adventure, and DMs would lay out the things that they wouldn't give you, because it was partly the system. It was hard to think about how would I make this work.
It was so much more rules light back then. But if you look at the history too, if you look at like the early 70s, I guess, maybe, when like Gygax was doing Gen Con and everything, like early on, like when they still owned it, and they were doing like adventures for the weekend.
Oh yeah.
And that was where, and the modules, right? And the way that DM modules or campaign modules were printed back then, and that was their
right. Yeah, like, that's how you did it.
That was their money, back in the day. They were very linear. It was like you start at the dungeon, you do the thing, and then it was like this other stuff happens tertiarily when you're outside of the dungeon. But for so long, it was just about the dungeon dive, right?
Yeah, and also, I think there was a lot of ways that you had, you did certain things in combat. There wasn't you weren't as allowed the creativity.
Yeah.
Early on, I think. And you probably were. There was probably just, and this may be my DM experience or whatever, but if you said, oh, well, I might want to pick up this table and whack something with it because I don't have a blunt weapon or whatever it was. It was hard for some DMs, I think, to come up with a way to do that. And early on in my campaigns, the D100s were my friend.
Yep.
I would a lot of time off the cuff.
Baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Figure out, okay, percentage chance of being able to do this. What do I think? And now it's interesting because that is built into the system so much more with skill checks and things like that. It just, didn't really exist in the early D&D.
And that's the thing that I think is so interesting about, if you look at original Dungeons and Dragons, like the box sets back in the day, like the 70s and 80s, which is where I got my start. Even though I started playing D&D in the 90s, I started playing the red boxed.
Yeah,
D&D.
Had somebody already colored in the dice for you?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Because I might have got a second hand. We might have even had dice. We might have had to get our own from like I don't know, you stole them from somewhere or whatever.
I remember pulling the blue. They were like light blue dice, and there was a black crayon that came in the box, and you colored in the side of the dice, and you wiped off the excess crayon to get your dice. I still have those dice.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they're still hanging around. They're a little beat up from being rolled around with a whole bunch of other dice, but they're still there.
That's a classic point, though. But if you look at like the old school Dungeons & Dragons to advanced D&D, and second edition advanced was where I spent the bulk of my time, because I got introduced into original Dungeons & Dragons. You introduced me to first edition advanced, and I played some with you and your group. But then my buddies and I got into second edition advanced because it dropped right around the time that we were playing a lot in the early 90s, or like late 89, 92, something like that. It was what was available in the stores, was all the, and for us it was the reprints with the black book, the black covers, and the white monster manual. And then I did third edition 3.5. Fourth edition dropped. I bailed and went to Pathfinder because it was just 3.5.
Yeah, fourth edition was
hot garbage. And then I was in Pathfinder or trying to get people to play old school D&D.
Yeah.
Until fifth edition came out, and I had people that wanted to play again, and I looked at it and I was like, well, this is so much easier than rewriting the old stuff. But like seeing that, and you spent more time in those worlds than I did, but seeing the expanse of the game rule set, the physical rule set, right? Because I've always taken the stance that the rules shouldn't stand in the way of the story. Right?
Absolutely.
And so I've never had a problem as a DM just being like, wing it, or just being like, you pass, you're good. Like, just give it to them if it advances the story, right? And it's not something that is better benefited by the tension of a potential failure, right?
Right.
But early on, there were so few rules. Like original Dungeons and Dragons, the halfling was a race. Like half elf was what you. I mean, it was like a class basically, right? You could only be certain levels when you were dwarves, or we couldn't be certain classes. There were class restrictions. So improvised weapons weren't really a thing. There were no rules for improvised weapons back then. Yeah. And then you get into second edition. By the time you get to second edition advanced, there's so many rules. The math is so all over the place. And then it simplifies over, and it changes. 3.5 got really bogged down on, like, combat was really, really rough because all the modifiers.
Yeah.
And they went so many different ways with the rules. Do you feel that they're, to your point of DMs having a hard time making that adjustment on the fly of something, is that a byproduct of a system that is rules light and you're almost hampered by the limit of the rules because people aren't thinking outside of, I mean, especially with early Dungeons & Dragons, that was like the origin of role playing. So people hadn't role played before, so they didn't have the experience of thinking outside the rules.
Right.
Or do you think it's the expansiveness of the rules later on in like 3.5 and stuff like that that limited people's thinking outside that box?
That's an interesting question. I guess in part, as a DM, I don't think about it much now just because that's the way I've always played. Sure. But if you're doing it, and it's one of the things, if you're more experienced, because in coming in, like if I was starting now with 5th edition, I think it would be interesting. And I have had some of my, because as a campaign group, I don't want to DM all the time. Of course, and so we've had other
It's nice to actually be a player occasionally, not the full-time DM.
Yeah, other people pick it up. And who played with me, for several years before they took over as DM for a little while, and they seem to do really, really well with it. The new systems, being very flexible, being having their story in mind, all that kind of stuff. And
are these people who've never played before you though?
Before me, yeah.
So you've influenced them being their DM for years prior.
So I mean that's possible, but I would think about. Would it be easier to pick up? Because I started DMing with, advanced and then second edition. And, even when we started rerunning this campaign, because it was before 5th, I said, no, we're not going to play any of this. We're going to play second edition.
Right. Yeah.
And the math in those editions are cumbersome. I mean, Thaco sucked. Everybody agree with that.
I love that shirt that says everything I learned about mathematics I learned from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And it has like the crazy equations and Thaco and the percentile charts and everything.
Yeah, how am I going to do that? To hit armor class 0. Oh my gosh, what is that? And nobody knows what Thaco. I had there was a guy I saw at downtown at a comic convention place that just had, if you know what Thaco means, you're old. And I was like, gotta get that 100%. Need that shirt.
So you're saying a negative armor class is better?
Yeah. What? Yeah. So I think that's probably one of the best rules that ever can. And it's a wonder that somebody didn't think about that years ago. Why in the original test playing was like, why don't we just make it higher as you get
exactly
additive rather than subtract? It's
because they were building off of the original Dungeons and Dragons, which had a 10-point armor
right
scale.
Exactly. So that's the thing, that
armor class 0 was as good as it got. That was full plate mail or something, and a shield.
But as smart as Gary Gygax was in getting all that stuff together, you would think at some point
somebody somewhere
one of those brilliant first people would have gone, wait a minute, Gary, it makes more sense to go up rather than...
I don't know, that's a crazy history though, if you've like watching the documentaries or like read like I've got the Art and Arcana D&D book, like has
absolutely
all the art,
I do too.
Phenomenal like historical treasure of looking at all the early artists and the stuff that they did, which hits me in my nostalgias because like all those artists were the ones that were doing all of the book covers and all of the monster manuals and all that stuff, when I was coming up. But and they just don't do it the same way anymore in publication, right? Because it's all computer. People aren't oil painting giant prints, anymore to be scanned and copied and pressed down into these covers or photographed. But they get into the history of the company of TSR and everything through there.
Yeah, TSR.
Yeah, and I remember when TSR got bought by Wizards, and that was like, it's the end of the world,
Yeah.
But like their business strategies, though, because they talked about that, like especially after second edition, that when did Wizards buy them at third? No, TSR still owned third.
I think so. I don't remember. It was
somewhere
when
in that general vicinity, I think, because they were fourth edition. I do remember that. Wizards was responsible for fourth edition.
Yep.
They might have been responsible for 3.5, as I recall, or it was right around there they got purchased. But I remember them saying that they just had warehouses of pallets of second edition books that had just been printed and were just sitting there because they didn't sell.
Yeah. Well, back then, so many things were different. I mean, Gary Gygax's, that whole, the original, was it Gods and Demigods that had to be pulled from the shelf because it had some Cthulhu references and things like that. Yeah, I still have one of those books that still has the original, with all of the copyrighted stuff that he pulled from other places that you couldn't do. And
that's this BattleTech manual for this tech readout for 3055. Mm-hmm. This is the original printing from FASA. It was before Catalyst Game Labs owns it now.
Right.
And they had to pull a bunch of stuff. So this has been reprinted because there was a bunch of mechs in there that were straight rips from like Evangelion and some of the animes and stuff like that later on became an IP infringement issue. So
yeah, and I do think back to your original question though, I do think that the flexibility did exist back in those days, even during the second edition time, because if you think about it, the Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman's books, came out, and that they actually role played that campaign, and that, I mean, what an amazing campaign to have role played. I mean, that is incredible. I mean, that's just
I'm actually rereading The War of Twins right now.
Oh yeah. Good series.
Yeah.
I reread them, not the original series, not long ago, and it's amazing now, looking back and going, man, what a campaign, what a fun campaign. Right? Yeah, somebody was just brilliant in writing that. But I do think there's a lot more resources more readily available now to DMs. I think you can get
for sure
better, faster now than you could back in where it was a lot of your imagination and a lot of that stuff. But now, I mean, if you want to come up with something pretty quickly, you want to go, I need a floor plan for a castle, and instead of taking graph paper and just drawing something up, you can look online and find so many things that you can then modify and do. There's so many programs out there that'll help you.
Get pre-made battle maps, like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And and with the 3D printer, even unfortunately, my wife is quite good with the 3D resin printer that we have, and I'm like, hey, I need 12 Dark Elf Warriors. Can I possibly get that? And
bam.
Yeah, and she'll print them up, and I can paint them before in a week before a campaign.
That's what's going on with that.
So cool.
Dragon up there, because I'm running a Trench Crusade global like legacy campaign, and one of the scenarios there's a quote unquote dragon. It's not necessarily a physical dragon, but it's they have to hunt this big beast that's running around and wrecking crap. And guys in our group are just like, you need one? I'll print it up for you. And it's back in the day that would have been like a $100 model.
$100 model or more. And I think I've still got a whole bunch of the metal figurines that I bought way back when, and who knows how many things have lead in them. I'm sure that they do.
Right here.
Yeah.
So this is one of my early Grenadier or Ralpartha. It's either Grenadier.
Oh yeah, Ralpartha. Oh gosh.
No, this is a Grenadier. This is an old Grenadier pewter model, and I'm actually playing.
Look at that.
This is one of my first models I painted, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm playing a Forbidden Psalm campaign with some buddies, and I've got two of those original models, and it's so funny to see them next to like modern models, so they're like wildly different in size and scale. It's crazy. And
it is, and it's not only that, just the scale, but the level of detail you can get now. I mean, because you can also, you get online to Heroes Forge or any of those places that can do the modeling for you. Yeah. And they have races. You can modify your thing. You don't have to be a genius at 3D printing software, and you can download the files and then you can print it. It's it's opened up a lot of doors for me, I know, with and even larger scale things like using just regular old 3D printer. Yeah. Okay. So it's a little the resolution isn't as good as the resin, but hey, I mean, you can build big castles.
That's what I was going to say. Do you remember, gosh, I don't know, this is well over 10 years ago, probably, right, when Dragon Forge did their first like hand-painted like tiles to do their dungeons and their cities and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
And that was crazy back then. And it was extremely expensive, but it was amazing, right? But nowadays, you get a filament printer and you could bang that out in a week.
Right.
And it costs you $30 for filament or something. It's crazy.
You can get the patterns online to build to do almost the exact same thing. And, and I remember back when in the early campaign, I mean, the creating by taking a piece of plexiglass and gluing graph paper to the back of it.
So
we could do it with a dry erase,
100%.
or a wax pen.
I used those old big poster frames that they used to make back.
Oh
in the day.
the poster frame. Yeah, absolutely.
Put it in there and pick it up, put it on the table.
Exactly. Yeah, you can throw it on the table. And I still use one of those to be frank, because there's some things you just can't anticipate and you just want to draw something. Because I still do random encounters. I mean, that's still I think part of the fun of D&D.
A mat, like a squared roll mat, like a vinyl mat that I roll out that I use a dry erase or wet erase marker on.
Oh yeah,
that works well. Do you think? So here's another one that's a hotly debated topic. I feel like, at least when I'm around. Do you feel that the use of miniatures and terrain are prohibitive of like creativity and the use of imagination, or is it like conducive to a better playing experience?
I think it's absolutely conducive to a better playing experience.
You do?
I do.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because it allows people to visualize things. Like instead of me having a picture of the battlefield in my brain and going, no, you can't fire that arrow from there because it's going to be obscured. Before they had to trust me. Well, now if there's something out there and I've drawn something, even on a drawing that says, stalagmite or whatever it is, if you're ducking behind something and it's in the line of fire that you want to shoot, no, you can't hit that guy. And I think if people can visualize that a lot better. I also think it helps with movement. It helps with a lot of just other things. The use of miniatures. And plus, I also like the personalization that people can do. Like if you have your own miniature of your character and you can paint your character however you want.
Yeah.
I want this. Like my character killed a lion, I'm taking the head and I'm sticking it on my head now. Sure. So I've got this lion cloak thing on my head. Fine. You can do that, and you can paint your miniature to look like you want your character to look. I think that helps people connect with their characters a little bit more. So I see an absolute use for miniatures, and I think, in some ways, even Warhammer early on helped with that, because some of the bigger battles and stuff, you had to have some way of tracking it.
For sure. And I guess it goes to the root of like chainmail being the the spawning of D&D. But so like, I guess counterpoint for me is I find that people tend to get wrapped around the axle on the specificity of the map in front of them, and they think in terms of movements of squares versus wanting to be able to do a thing.
Right.
And it bogs down combat a lot of times, because now they're going to try and hem and haw and strategically move and whatever, and like, I can't move 30 feet that way, so if I do this, then I can't do that, and I'm like, I can't quite get around to flank the person to get the bonus for my buddy, versus it just being like narratively fudge it in your brain and you're good to do the thing because it's cooler.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I do think there's got to be a little bit of a balance there. Like, you can't say I'm going to throw a fireball and I'm going to get all 50 of those monsters in
of course not.
Fireball. You've got to have an area of an effect, and I think again it helps you visualize. Yeah, that's too big. You're not going to get all those guys, or you're going to get all your party members if you throw it there. So I do think that helps. You could probably argue it either way. But sure, I think I prefer working with miniatures for the reasons I already said, and then also just to be able to keep track of a battle. But I also recognize that there's times when I will maybe fudge a movement rate just a little bit or something like that. If I think, okay, I'll let you dive behind that thing as part of your movement. I'm not going to say you just freeze in midair or whatever. It's that.
Do you feel it prolongs combat though, or it expedites combat?
I mean, combat in D&D, because it's rule based, because it's rolling, because it's all that, is always going to be long. It's just one of those things that takes a while. And I mean, I guess it prolongs it a little bit because it does give people the choice. Oh, well, I want to go over here. I want to go over there. Which one? But I think in playing games where there wasn't a board and there wasn't miniatures early days, there was still a lot of that going around where you'd ask the DM over and over for the description of the battlefield. Like, okay, was that guy over here? Was he over there? Would I be able to reach? So there was still a lot of questions going back and forth. Now I think some of that's answered by the board in front of you rather than the DM.
Yeah.
So I guess you could, you go
either way.
I still would, right? I would still prove. Yeah, it still doesn't take as long as when a character decides to go shopping. I still think that's still the time suck that is the.
I'm all for the role playing in the story, but my God, it's 45 minutes in the store just pointlessly bartering and arguing with the person that, like, I don't know, it grates my bacon or something. I don't know what the term is. What are the kids saying these days?
Yeah, but I will say I occasionally think cool things happen on those shopping trips.
They will, yeah.
Because every now and then, like, I'll have an NPC figured out and I'll just do a strange voice for it, or I'll come up with a weird, quirky NPC. I remember a shopkeeper that I had in this weird bog swamp area where I had the party, and it was a lizard man. And his backstory was kind of fascinating because, lizard men aren't typically shopkeepers in a human settlement.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, and he sold all these weird pets and dangerous things like that, and poisonous snakes and stuff. But he ended up being a really fascinating character, and just because he had a kind of a weird accent and he was crazy and he did nutsy things, that he became kind of a repeating character. They would always want to go visit this guy's shop. And so as a DM, I had to develop that character way more than I thought I would as a regular shopkeeper. Similarly, I do Christmas one-shots a lot of times, or holidays one-shots, solstice one-shot, whatever. And I came up with a wizard whose specialty was potions, but in candy form. And his name's Cadbury, Cadbury the Wizard. And it's funny because I painted a miniature with him. He's holding a candy cane up, and he's like, it's old cranky guy, but he makes all these holiday themed candies and stuff like that.
Man, if I could take a potion every time and it tastes like Cadbury cream egg,
exactly.
Yes. Sign me up.
Yeah, he has a candy cane that if you lick the red stripe, it's one thing. If you lick the white stripe, it's another thing. And
it's so good.
So yeah, it's just kind of fun things to do. But sometimes those guys have become really in Critical Role. Again, I'll give you an example. In the Mighty Nine campaign that they ran, the character Pumat Soul, which is a cloned artificer. And so there's, hi, I'm Pumat Soul, I'm Pumat Soul, I'm Pumat Soul. So there's several versions of him. And then there's Pumat Prime, who was the original one. And it was just in the game, it was fascinating. And I liked that character and thought it was super creative.
Yeah, and I get that because, like, I guess that goes to the essence of one of the big joys of DMing for me, at least, which is the creative storytelling.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times the ability to just think on my feet and come up with something, and like humorously, I on a whim in a campaign came up with Jerry, Harry, Larry, and Terry and Gary, and they were all like gnome characters that were all twins, right? But it was like they kept popping up at random places, and the players were always like, wait a second, is this guy lying to us? Is his name actually Jerry, or is it the same person that just happens to be here? Like it was like one of those sort of like ongoing gags throughout the entire thing. They just came up on a whim just to make someone laugh once, and then I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity to put another one in. Let me go for it.
I did that once. I had and it actually worked because I used it as a story element later, but I had a random encounter in camp, and I was just sort of filling out a table of random encounters. I was like, let's just put something silly on here. And so I put this kind of a brownie character, but he was a little bit more mischievous and would jump in. And like if something had happened earlier in the campaign, he would kind of mock the character, mimic what they were doing, and just like point at them and laugh and then disappear.
Kind of like the brownies from Willow.
Yep. And it sort of...
baby fresh to bikini while he was taking a pee-pee.
And so I had that guy a couple of times, and he, like one character fell during a campaign, during a battle, and ended up rolling down a hill, and the this thing showed up and mimicked him doing it.
Oh my
and,
God,
laughed and just signed out. And then it just so happened I just kept that character, that little NPC, on my random encounter sheet, and it happened to the same character.
Oh my God,
like
that's amazing!
3 or 4 times, just coincidentally. And I was like, this is just too good.
Yeah.
And so I kept coming up with new gags for the thing. And eventually I actually ended up using him to nudge the characters in a different direction, because he did show up one time and he wasn't being the clown mocking thing. He was actually trying to deliver a message, and they did figure it out. It took them a little while. They did figure it out. But yeah, so that it became a little of a fun thing, and it started out just as a joke, and it ended up being useful.
I love when that happens. Yeah, and I think that's the reason sometimes I struggle with some other people's DMing styles, is because for me it is the group narrative that we're telling,
right?
That is the appeal to me for that story, because those are the stories that you come back and you're 10 years later, you're sitting around the table with a beer with your friends, and you're talking about an old campaign you played. And you're like, dude, you remember that time that Mike hit the guy with the thing and the stuff, and the dragon fell and blah, 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 and it smushed Mike's sister, or whatever,
For years and years, there was a, and I can't recall the monster right now, but it looks like a nest with eggs in it. And when it,
throwback, what is that one?
What is it? And you come up and you get close, and it pops up as a big skeleton looking thing, and it attacks you. God, I can't remember what the name of the character, but anyway, we encountered one, and I was not the DM on this one, but one of my my dearest friends, and rest in peace, Nate. He was a great guy, and died a few years back, unfortunately. But yeah, his characters were halflings almost always. He loved halfling thieves. That was his thing.
That was his jam.
And he's like, I'll go up and rub it. Of course, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. And so for years afterward, hey, Nate, why don't you go rub it? It became a running joke.
Just like a social gag. Which is even funnier to give them the context, maybe outside of a D&D game. You tell someone
absolutely. That would happen at parties and stuff like that. So it wasn't, because a lot of those same folks hung around with us. That was back in graduate school. And so, a lot of those same folks that played hung around together.
That's so good. So what would you say is your preferred edition of D&D that you've played?
I honestly say 5th, although I kind of like some of the things they're doing with the new one, although I don't like everything. There's some stuff I just absolutely can't get into with was it the 2014 edition or 2015 edition, or not 2024 edition?
24. I was like,
sorry,
that was 5th edition.
For all those listening, I'm old. So, but yeah, the 2024, the newest one. I mean, I know they changed the cleric cast characters, which was good, because 5th edition, the clerics aren't as powerful as I feel like they at higher levels should be. I think they're great lower levels, but then they gotta get swamped. I think 5th edition is probably still my favorite overall. I think it's probably the most flexible but easily accessible for a newer player. Definitely. And I do play with a lot of newer players these days. So it does seem like that's an edition that they can pick up pretty easily without a lot of the 2nd edition,
mental gymnastics,
tables, and your your character can be a lot more of your character, and you don't have to worry too much about some of that. And character generation is always an interesting thing too, because that's one thing where I almost never follow the rule books.
Yep. I was going to say, okay, so on that point, how do you do your stat rolls?
So way back in 2nd edition, there was I Unearthed Arcana that came out with some. Yeah, you got the book.
No, I don't have. That's why I need that one. That's the next one I need.
Yeah, see some
good Oriental Adventures. I need Unearthed Arcana.
Oh yeah, boy, Oriental Adventures. Now there's one you can't produce these days.
Oh yeah,
man, that book. Although some really good stuff in that book.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you can mine some of that out of there, you get some great content. So the deal was it let you basically build a good character by saying, okay, here's the class you want to roll for.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to roll 66 or whatever it is for this stat because that's your main stat. So if you want to roll a wizard, you're going to have that in your intelligence. And you're going to roll more dice and you're going to take the top 3 of those. And so it ensures that you're going to get a good character, but then you'll have other rolls where your charisma may only be, 3 dice or 2.
Yeah.
No, well, that's 3. It's got to be 3. But, so you may only get 3 dice. So you may have a super intelligent wizard who's incredibly homely, and not very wise.
Yeah.
So it does give you a character that is strong in the areas where you want it to be strong. And then I've done other things too, where a character, I always talk to my players, if they're going to generate a character, I want to talk to them first. What are you thinking? Here's what, what are you looking at? And then I'll help guide them through that character generation process. And if I think, one of those roles, I'll say, you know what? Why don't you roll one more? So I'll give it a little bit of flexibility just so they can get a good character. Because, it's fun, yes, to play. And I know this was part of the original D&D game where, it was fun to play a character that was kind of mediocre and, wasn't quite as good. But for a newer player, I think it's tough.
Well, D&D back in the day was, if we're talking original Dungeons and Dragons, right? It was much more lethal too.
Oh, gosh, yes.
So you weren't necessarily sitting on a character. Man. It was much more infrequent that you get a character to level 5, much less level 10 or 15 or whatever.
Oh yeah. And it's interesting too because I've had a character that was a bard character actually, and back then you had to have a certain intelligence and a certain charisma and certain. Well, he ended up getting into an accident and lost an intelligence point permanently and could no longer be a bard. But it did make for an interesting side quest because then the DM I was actually playing with at the time built this whole thing around me getting my intelligence point back through some ion stones.
Ion stones.
Thing going around your head. So I could go back to being a bard again rather than just a fighter. So yeah, I think that's pretty fascinating.
And I think and I guess that leads me to another kind of follow-on question that. When you have a non-min-maxed character,
right.
Because it's easy in a lot of the 3.5 and up to kind of go that min-max approach. Even the second edition in some ways as well, depending on how you did your character gens.
Yeah.
But in those situations where you have someone who isn't min-maxed, do you find that most people use those as role-playing beats or role-playing triggers, or are they just kind of like? I'm just going to not do strength checks because my guy isn't very strong and I'm just going to play him however I want to play him.
No, I think, and again, I think this is a difference between experienced players versus beginners. An experienced player takes that as a thing. I've had a character who, his strength was pretty low, but he believed himself to be very strong and always was the one who would try the bend bars, lift gates.
Sure.
His chance of success is super, super low, but I can remember his character twice in a row rolled incredibly well on a percentile and managed to move the gate. In his mind, the character played it this way. In his mind, he believed he was incredibly strong.
Yeah.
And so I can lift that. And of course, the other characters knew he couldn't, but so it became a play point. And it was a funny, lighthearted kind of way of doing that and playing that. Would a new player quite get that? Probably. I mean, some.
And I think if they're probably encouraged to by their DM.
Absolutely. And I've seen some players who just sort of were natural actors or natural theater people or whatever that really got into the foibles of their character. you know, whether it's your character has to have this long beard and they love their beard and they, you know, oil it every night and do all that sort of stuff. And then, you know, another character turns it blue or whatever. It's, you know, it can be a really hysterical thing to have happen. So I think those kinds of, again, those non-min-max characters are fun.
Sure.
You know, the character I'm running right now is not super min-maxed. He's got some really good points, but he's got some really weak points too. And I think it's kind of fun to play that.
Well, and it's not to say that you can't have either a highly average across the board stat or a very high end statted character, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to role play it well, right? Like,
right.
It depends on what you put into the character and how you decide to, you know, get after it and what kind of, you know, role playing hooks you put into it and your DM and stuff. But generally speaking, I've always found that having as many triggers basically or hooks as possible built into your character, it makes it for a more enjoyable and creative role playing experience, because then it's like, I didn't really want to be a super charismatic dude. I was wanting to play a really cranky guy. So how can I maybe work this into playing something or getting out of my comfort bubble of, you know, I always like to play Rangers, or I always like to play, you know, Warlocks or something, right? You know?
Yeah, that's one thing I think I always encourage players to do is don't play the same doggone class every time. Yes, I know you love to play barbarian fighters.
Yep.
Play a wizard.
Do something different.
Play something different. Play something different, because I think it makes you a better rounded character. And we've got a character right now that's playing that I absolutely love, because he's good at almost nothing. And he bought this. I know what it was. I was running a campaign to introduce them and start them off in a place, and I made up this festival called Bard Fest. And so he bought a drug rug that was I Heart Bard Fest, you know, the old shawl thing that was, and it says I Heart Bard Fest. He's been wearing that the rest of it, and he is way up in level now.
That's amazing.
And he's still wearing that, and so we're like, oh man, dude, your armor class sucks because you won't wear armor. You'll only wear the I Heart Bard Fest. But it's funny when you get a creative person like that who wants to play. You know, the other thing I was thinking about though, when you were talking about all of this, is I wonder if the game shifted a little bit, because back in the older days, there was sort of an emphasis on characters being regular people who were thrown into irregular events.
Absolutely. Yep.
Nowadays, I think the theory, and I've seen this kind of with some of the game developers now, no, adventurers are by definition heroes. We should make them heroic and have some special skills and special things. Yep. And so I do think there's a difference in the way the game has changed from being, these kind of average Joes are the where you start, versus being, you're sort of built for this life. You're kind of going to be an incredible character to start with.
100%. I think there's actually, maybe it might have been a 5th edition book. I don't remember, but something definitely had that as almost exact statement.
Yeah, I think I got that generally from a 5th edition book.
Yeah, which tracks.
But I don't think that was the case back when the original editions were written. I think because you could be, you know, a farmer who just happened to have a bunch of orcs attack your farm or something. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think those were a lot of times the hooks early on in a lot of those campaigns. You know, something happened and you just decided to be the person to take up arms or whatever. Situation might have called for.
Even in, you know, the Tracy Weiss, those books. I mean, there was a barmaid, right? I mean, you know, some of those guys were heroes. Absolutely, they were already on their way, but then the regular characters would get picked up.
So you mentioned Dragonlance a couple times. That's the Margaret Weiss Tracy.
Yeah, Dragonlance. Yeah.
So we're 2nd edition. I felt like they tried. Okay, so I will caveat that they tried to mostly reintroduce it during 5th edition, but I feel like 2nd edition was the pinnacle of other like pre-made world campaign settings.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you had Greyhawk, you had Dragonlance, you had Ravenloft, you had Forgotten Realms before Forgotten Realms became the center for everything.
Yeah,
you had Dark Sun, which they would never do today.
They would never do Dark Sun again.
Spelljammer, you had the
Spelljammer.
what was the The Planescape.
Planescape.
Am I forgetting anything else?
Probably. And there was a couple of those things that came out that didn't hit well.
Yeah, they were
in the market
niche.
and disappeared pretty quickly. So I'm sure there's probably ones we're forgetting, but yeah, I do think that's true. I think because I remember having the one that everybody loves, the World of Greyhawk, that module. I have that module with the big map of Greyhawk, and it's hard to come by that thing now in a full set. I've set that aside.
But I have such a nostalgia for those big boxes when you would get like the World of Kryn, like you get the Dragonlance box set or the Ravenloft one specifically. I absolutely love that one because it was just so, and it was so much lore and like world content and stuff like that. That it was maps, and then you had modules, and you had pre-made characters, and you had all these lore books. It was in this big box set. They were so cool, man.
And remember there was also the whole fan fiction stuff that was around it too. Not just the Dragonlance, but there was a lot of Forgotten Realms books back in the day, and the Harper's series was a big thing.
Elminster,
all those 80s group. That's and I think Stranger Things. I've seen those books. I think a couple of times on some Stranger Things shelves in the kids' rooms, which is good on the prop guys, right? But yeah, I do think that's I think that's true. I think the pre-made campaign, and also remember Dragon Magazine had modules
in it,
published in it, and again it was to build the game. And now of course it's so much easier to publish something like that. If you want to do your home cooking things, you can even load it onto some of the platforms. So it's much, much easier.
Well, I think second edition was the pinnacle also of just source books, because you remember the like the brown covered with a gold foil print with those they were like very like the Ranger's Handbook, the Fighters. It started off like reasonable.
Psionics Handbook,
and then it became like Arms and Equipment 1, Arms and Equipment 2. Like they just kept growing and growing and growing. There's so many of those books.
They had to be making money on those things. I mean, that's what they had to be doing.
Would assume so, maybe not. I don't know.
And then there were geeks like me who would buy every one of them.
I tried, and then it was like there's like 50 of those. Oh man, I'm never gonna have all those.
Never
There's so many of them.
Yeah, I didn't.
But so what was your favorite setting, like pre-made setting in D&D? Whether you played in it or just read the fiction.
Probably, I mean, the early Forgotten Realms books, I think, were still with the Harpers. I think that was a well-developed, I mean, Dragonlance, the world there was interesting. There's a lot of really cool monsters there.
It's very different than like
a lot of god-centric stuff too. I think I really liked Forgotten Realms. And Greyhawk as well. I mean, Greyhawk's up there too, I'd got to say, because Greyhawk, just the city, all of the things that went around Greyhawk were also a lot of fun.
I always felt like you had like Forgotten Realms was very Greyhawk adjacent.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's hard to seperate the two,
right? Like they were pretty close. Dragonlance was very different. It had very much its own, like we have our own heavy pantheon. We got draconians, like we have our own unique monsters, those kinds of things to it. And the Ravenloft was its own interesting thing, and that kind of merged into the Planescape and the Planner lines and stuff.
Yeah, and
Dark Sun was just weird.
Dark Sun was, and also the Ravenloft, fascinating. Before we got into a lot of horror genre stuff that I'm sure existed back then. Maybe I just didn't know it or wasn't aware of it.
I mean, there might have been like a D20 thing or something, but like there wasn't the Lovecraftian explosion that happened in the 2000s.
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
So I don't know what kind of horror genres. I mean, there's Vampire the Masquerade. There was Werewolf. That White Wolf, the company White Wolf was doing back in the day, right around second edition.
Yeah.
But like aside from that, there really wasn't at least not a mainstream horror genre that I know of.
And so Ravenloft was very different. This whole dark world of and you played it was very heavy campaigns a lot of times. Yeah, that was a really interesting.
Well, and they played on all the tropes too, which I thought was interesting. They took a unique twist on all of the main, monster tropes that I thought was pretty cool. And they did it in a way that, we can just link into everything. And they also did a great job of taking Lord Soth from
absolutely
from the Dragonlance novels and making him an integral part to all of the stories. kind of like a Fizbin did,
to
Dragonlance and to Mark White's Tracy Hickman's. Even so much so that they, which I always appreciate the fact they got away with this. They took Fizbin, which was Paladine, in the Dragonlance Chronicles. Just spoiler alert if you haven't read these books from 30, 40 years ago. By the way. And they used him as Zifnab in the Deathgate cycle that they also wrote. That was a non-D&D separate series that I thought was really cool. So I felt like I was always compelled by the Dark Sun setting, but I never played much in it. I read some of the source books and stuff, and I thought it was really cool because I really like psionics. I thought psionics was really compelling back in second edition.
Yeah.
And it was very heavy psionic setting.
I love the fact when you rolled for a psionic check and things like that, that they thought about humorous things that could happen. Because I remember more than once on a fail, one character that was playing in a game that I was DMing had all of his clothes jump 4 feet to the left.
Just off,
it
off
happened.
body,
It
was kind of like Wild Magic
times.
before Wild Magic was a thing. Yeah,
exactly.
it was really great. I really loved psionics back then when it was simple and straightforward.
Yeah. And then they tried to make it more spell based kind of thing, and I don't know, it wasn't quite as fun then.
And I really loved Ravenloft for what it brought to the table. I have more nostalgia for Dragonlance.
I do too, and I think it's because of the fiction.
To it. Yeah, and the fiction. It's 100% the fiction for me. Because I never actually, I'm trying to think, I don't know if I ever actually played in Dragonlance and Krynn. Like, I don't think I ever played any games in Krynn. I played a ton of Forgotten Realms, but that's because so I was actually really disappointed, I think, when they picked that they were going to do everything in Faerun. Right.
Oh yeah.
When they started making that decision for that everything was going to be set in Forgotten Realms, and I don't know why I always felt like I think it's because I felt railroaded. Because like, okay, you're going to write all your rule books and everything set in this lore instead of it just being a generic rule book, right?
Yeah.
And now everyone thinks this is where D&D takes place, and it was like, what about all the other places? What about creating our own worlds?
Yeah,
and doing
and
our own
Spelljammer,
thing,
which Spelljammer opened up so many cool ideas.
Oh, wow,
and, I mean, just the visiting a whole water planet. And, kind of. Spelljammer was fun. I mean, I enjoyed Spelljammer.
They were definitely taking the throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks approach to writing back then.
100%. And I think some things really hit with some people and not with others. I mean, I know a mutual friend that we have was so into Oriental Adventures.
Oh yeah,
that was like a thing for them. And of course, in the real life, they were martial artists and all that. So it made sense that they would gravitate to that setting. It's amazing to me thinking about a lot of the fun and the fiction that's out there for D&D, why there haven't been better D&D movies. I mean, the most recent attempt has been probably the best.
The least bad. Yeah.
But I mean, I liked it, actually. I enjoyed it. It was one of the more enjoyable
It was
movies,
not disappointing, finally.
Yeah, whereas, so many of them have been just terrible. And I've always wondered, it seems like the Dragonlance series could have been made into a decent movie, but there's good character development in there. It could be good, but nobody's ever done it, and I don't know why. I've always wondered about that.
Well, I know the Dragonlance stuff specifically got deeply tied up in a lot of copyright battles between Margaret White, Tracy Hickman, and TSR and Wizards of the Coast. There's a lot of that, which is why they just brought it back into the D&D realm under Wizards of the Coast, because they finally reached some settings. Because my understanding is it's supposed to be for D&D 1 was supposed to be the setting was supposed to be Krynn. But I wonder though if part of that is and I mean, growing up in the 80s, right? Like I've got a soft spot for bad movies.
Oh my gosh, there's so many of them.
But like that was an element of old school sword and sorcery movies, was they were just kind of bad. They're always they're just kind of cheesy, right?
They were just cheesy,
and that's kind of the appeal to them. So I just don't know if anyone ever prior to Lord of the Rings took making a fantasy movie seriously.
Yeah, I mean, not in this. I think there's some foreign ones that have done a better job of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Not a Hollywood movie necessarily,
right.
But there's definitely been some worthy attempts, I think.
Well, you can make the argument that martial arts movies, like traditional martial arts movies, like traditional kung fu movies, are fantasy movies. Like, and you look at like anything in the genre of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or that kind of thing. And there's lots of that going back in the 80s and 70s, and they were being done at a equivalent or higher level quality than sword and sorcery in the 80s was being made. For sure.
at least equivalent. Absolutely. And those things, you think about them, all the Beast Masters of the, Red Sonja, and there were so many of those things. And even, I mean, to some degree, I guess you could include Conan series in there.
Don't you dare speak devil. Our Lord and Savior Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, I mean, those were. I mean, if you look at Arnold when he first started those movies, I mean, he couldn't do dialogue.
Have you seen? That's why there's no spoken dialogue in it.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Arnold documentary that Netflix did? It's like a 6-part.
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh God, you got to watch it. It's so good. If you didn't love Arnold before, you're gonna fall in love with that guy. I'm not saying he's like a perfect individual. Please don't.
No.
Anybody take me as that. However, it's really cool seeing where he came from and what he did to get to where he went and everything, and the acting, especially because I mean I saw so many of his movies in the 80s and 90s. Like it was really cool to see that era of his life and everything. It's just, man, it's funny.
I mean, give the guy credit. He started out as this, just bulky, massive muscle guy
who contributed so much to workout science, though. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, he did. He really did, and he had a. I mean, not that he's brilliant.
Yep.
I mean, for all the accent and all of the bad imitations that are out there of him, he was very successful as an actor, and it's because he put in the work.
100%.
I mean, everything he did, you had to put in the work to be a bodybuilder. You had to put in the work to be an actor. You had to put in the work to be a politician. So he's done that.
And he seems, at least externally, based on, what's out there in the world, has like the ability to laugh at himself too.
True. Otherwise, why would you make movies?
Yeah,
with Danny DeVito
is awesome. Those kinds of things. And I respect that. I respect that a lot.
I do too.
So you think, getting back to the D&D thing? So some of you said maybe think about this. Do you think that I'll back this up. So D&D has endured.
Absolutely.
I would say established the groundwork of role playing. Period.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And has maintained for 50 plus years.
Yeah,
are we there in that realm?
We're
right?
in that realm. Yeah,
somewhere in that
early
vicinity,
70s right? Now it's 50 years.
So in the 50s, right?
Yeah,
and there have been loads of other role playing games that Rifts and like D20 and Savage Lands or Savage Worlds, whatever that D&D that campaign system was called. I mean, loads of different role playing systems over the years. All the Lovecraft stuff, all kinds of different systems. Daggerheart's a new one that apparently is getting a lot of hype. Do you think just because it set the standard and most people know it, but two, because of especially what they were doing around 2nd edition advanced, that they cast such a wide net and they appeal to such a diverse group of people, that is why it's endured for as long as it has? Because I mean, 4th edition was pretty hot garbo. Like
it really was.
I don't know many. There was a very small series of people that liked 4th edition, and it wasn't anybody who'd been playing D&D up until that point, right?
No, not very much.
It has endured a significant amount of time and found a huge resurgence.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure there's probably a PhD sociologist could write their doctoral thesis and more on D&D, because I think that, and probably a business one too, to be honest, because I think one of the reasons D&D was successful early on was it did have a niche audience, but then they weren't as into they weren't going to protect their copyright. They weren't one of these companies where, and the nature of the game led itself to being creative and doing a lot of things with the game. And those resources were published in places like Dragon Magazine, and not always where TSR had control over everything. And so there were adjacent source materials that were out there. And so it grew very organically. And I think to some degree, at least, TSR was okay with that.
Totally. Yeah.
Back then. But this was, 70s. And I mean, nobody would be okay with that now.
No, well, I mean, you look at like
100%.
Probably if you look in wargaming at probably the equivalent game company of Wizards of the Coast now, or TSR would have back there. You look Games Workshop, right? And Games Workshop is just on a bender of lawsuits everywhere, left and right, just suing companies.
Absolutely. Now, at the same time, we didn't have the internet back then, so it wasn't as easy to throw content out there and get it up. You had to actually publish something. You could publish a lot in your of sort of these white paper things that would go into your local game shop.
Well, yeah,
and
it was like punk rock zines,
Right. Just little zine things that would be very local, and then people would buy it and love it, and then all of a sudden you had a little bit bigger market, maybe you could send it to Dragon, maybe you could send it somewhere else, or even submit it to TSR. And, so I think there was, because they were flexible in the beginning, the game had a lot of followers who didn't really, I think, recognize always that this was one company, that D&D and TSR were equal.
Right.
So, it wasn't Magic Kingdom and Disney. Those things, is absolutely equal. So I think that was part of it, that they were flexible in the early days, built a following, had a very good system. And then as they kind of grew and it started to become what it's become now, at some point it was just the game that everybody went back to. I also think the basic content is appealing. I think, it's hard for some people to get into the robot war games, for example.
Sure.
And there's tons of those out there. But the sword and sorcery genre has always been a great fantasy thing. I mean, look how many successful series there are of those, the Tolkien-esque things, all of those sorts of knights and shining. That's been that's been fiction that's been written back into the
BCs. I mean, you look Greek and Roman mythology, you look at Nordic mythology. It's all based on that.
Yeah. And so I think you've got something that obviously resonates with humans, and the idea that you could pick up a sword and go slay a dragon is a very appealing thing. And I think people gravitate. I mean, God, how many people go to Ren fairs? Yeah. I mean, and we could talk about being nerdy and being geeky, but I mean, the one here in North Carolina, for example, the one that I know about more is it runs for months, and it's packed every day. I mean, they now have road signs, sold out.
That's crazy.
So if you don't buy tickets in advance, you're not getting in.
Yeah.
It's nuts. And it's that, I mean, and sure, that's part of the whole resurgence, but I think the reason is some of the source material resonates with people. And then as you go into that's just built up steam, and it's such a big piece that's out there now. I think it's hard for another system to really take over. You'll get systems that are good. I mean, I think Pathfinder is a great system.
Sure. Yeah,
honestly.
Definitely. There's a lot I like about Pathfinder, especially second edition.
There's a lot of things I like about Pathfinder. But there's just so much stuff. There's so much support for you if you're going to play D&D.
Do you think the source base material that you're talking about, is that we're talking psychosocial at this point, right? But
yeah.
Do you think it's because there is the very tangible, the real of I can physically pick up a bladed weapon, a machete, a sword, or whatever, right? Compared with the wonder and the imagination of if I go around the corner behind my house into the bushes, I might find a magical land where there's a dragon. Right. So it's like the crossroads of the tangible and the fantastical.
Yeah, that's a good
Whereas
point.
like science fiction is I mean, if you live in America, you can go grab a gun, right?
Right.
And we're probably not far from our AI overlords sending robots after us, right?
Yeah, right.
I could go shoot a Roomba rather if I wanted to, So it's a little bit more realistic, which is, I think, also if you talk about the psychosocial delineation between people who are typically more attracted to science fiction versus fantasy, right? I think it's typically is like I like more based in reality things versus less. And I always get into, when I watch movies, it's one of the reasons horror movies don't do it for me. Like there's an unspoken contract between the director and the viewer that I'm going to ask you to suspend belief to a certain degree within this film, and I, as the viewer, am entering into this contract saying, yes, I'm going to do that. But there's a point sometimes when a lot of movies go where it's like, okay, now you've just gone into the realm of the ridiculous, and it's pulling me out of the narrative that you're trying to paint for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But traditional fantasy is like that sweet spot in between, where it's like there's a part of me when I was a child that every time I'd find a bridge in the woods, I was hoping it was going to take me somewhere magical, right?
Yeah, and it is funny when because we were just talking about before we started doing the recording was the movie The Deep, and I can remember being so disappointed in that movie because I thought up to that point when they were solving the problems and this underwater base that's just having issues, and they got to go out and they're And then to be rescued by aliens at the end of it, it's like, holy jeez, come on. Can you,
that was your out?
It's just like, man, you come on. You could have figured out something, right? But also, if you haven't seen the movie The Deep, there you go.
What are you doing to your life?
Sorry about that.
We saved you an hour and a half of your life. It's fine.
Yeah.
When you think about gaming and you think about D&D, is it D&D specific for you? Because one of the things that I've noticed there are definitely cases and parallels in like the miniature wargaming community. I'm not trying to speak completely unilaterally, but generally speaking, wargamers, miniature gamers oftentimes will at least dip their toe in multiple different systems, multiple different games, right?
No, 100%.
A lot of them are here for the plastic crack. Just look at the wall of plastic behind me, right? I've got probably at least 10 game systems represented behind me, I imagine, right?
Absolutely.
So
a lot of miniatures
a lot of miniatures up there that probably need to be painted and assembled. Yeah. But in role playing, you don't see that as much. You see a lot of like mono system, just I'm a D&D player, or screw that, I only play Rifts, or right, I only play XYZ. There's not as much of the broad swath that you'll get of people dipping into different things. Why do you think that is?
That's a good question, because it's funny. I've tried different games myself, and I've always swung back to D&D.
What else have you played?
Warhammer. I've played some. I said Pathfinder earlier. I've played some others out there, but over the years. But I always come back to D&D, and I think it's because I think there's a lot of support for it, and I think there's more support for it than any other game, and maybe and it could just be a bias too. I mean, it could be just the thing that I started with, so therefore I have it's got the soft spot in my heart, and I know the most about it too. That's the other thing, I'm sure, because learning a new game system, is tough. I mean, it takes time to learn a new game system, whereas I know D&D, and I can play that, I can do that, and so for me that's maybe a different question. And at this point in time, I don't know that I want to put the time in to learn a new system, so I always gravitate back to D&D, and I think that's where, and maybe that's where everybody is. There's a lot of into video games. I mean, why do the same series sell well?
Well, I don't know. I mean, at that point, I think we're talking about like the Hollywood and the serialization of stuff, because a sequel will always get made, right? I mean, look at what Marvel's been doing for the past 20 years of just shoving mediocre superhero movies down our throat, right? Instead of just making good quality ones, right? So, but I think the thing that you're touching on there, which I think is interesting, is like, so what I've heard, especially recently with the surge in Daggerheart, which is like the new, which I don't really know much about. I haven't really looked at it.
I haven't either. I know it's out there, but I haven't really played it.
I know a lot of people are saying that, oh, this is like superior D&D, right?
Yeah.
And I also, as a side tangent, people like dog on aspects of 5th edition D&D, and I don't understand why, because for me, it's just like, this is the simplest, cleanest, most base level Dungeons & Dragons that they've had around in the very, very, very long time. That's so accessible.
But you know what fascinating to me about those people? It's like when you are a heavy metal fan or something, and
which I am.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. 100% agree. But then you say, the band's a sellout there, but and I think that's what a lot of it is. You want to go somewhere else. You want to do this thing, and then you consider yourself superior to everybody else because you're in this gaming system, and that old gaming system that everybody plays. That's the system.
Well, because that's what I hear people say about Daggerheart is like, oh, well, it fixes things that are broken in D&D, and I'm like, then just fix it in D&D. Like, you have control over what rules you use.
Absolutely.
Have you never house ruled anything before? I don't know. Like,
I
have that kind of idea in my head where I'm just like, what is so broken in Dungeons & Dragons that you can't just be like, yeah, we're not going to use that rule anymore. We're going to do this instead.
And there's a number of those things that, and I can't think of it now, but I can remember starting campaigns going, okay, there's a rule. This is it. Ignore it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a dumb rule.
Yeah.
And
and
that's a house rule thing.
Do you think that comes from the era of, I'm gonna dial in specifically because I can speak to this one. second edition Dungeons and Dragons, because there was so many rules and rule variants and options that they brought in that you just had the option to like pick and choose what you wanted to use and not use. And you were encouraged to be like, hey, if you don't like this crit roll system, then use this other crit roll system. Or you want to use enduring injuries, do the enduring injury rules.
Yeah.
But, you know, or you want to do these special subclasses of these things, you could use these or not. So like there was that era of just a long era of second edition, because it was around for a very long time.
Second edition was around for and partly probably because the company was going through all the kinds of things it was going through, I think was probably why. But second edition was out there for a really long time. And, you know, I think the thing with second edition is, I don't know that anybody knew all the rules. There are just too many books.
There was way too many
books. There's just too many books. I mean, I have 2 6-foot bookshelves of books, and most of them are second edition.
I would love to check out what the actual book count was of published works of second edition. It's got to be 1,000,
enormous.
Right? It's got to be over 1,000.
Like and not to mention the fact that all the other source material that was out there for it that was published in magazines and other stuff. I mean, it's an enormous amount of material. And there's an enormous amount of material now for 5th edition that's out there because the internet's made it so easy to get material out. But anyway, I do think that because nobody really knew every rule besides the base rules, that people were very comfortable with making up their own rules. And I don't, you know, and I think older players now probably are still super comfortable with making up their own rules.
That was my point. I feel like that's my bias. Is I'm just like, I'll just house rule. I don't care.
And I don't know what. And again, the folks that have played with me all come in with me is in my worlds, and where I'm saying ignore that because it makes no sense, you know. And also that just isn't going to work. So don't bother with it. So they're pretty comfortable with doing that, and so when they go out and DM, they're that way. So I wonder how much of that over the years, you know, older players have played and gone, this rule's terrible. Why did we even? Let's not bother with this stupid rule. And so I think there's you know, one of the things I was talking about this with somebody else is D&D is always playtesting. You know, every time you pick up dice, you're playtesting.
You're playtesting, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it.
And it's always, because every time a character tries something new and interesting, I'm adding that to my own set of guidelines and rules. It's like, you know, that worked for them, but it was way too powerful. I need to figure a way of not doing that way again. So, you know, where you can make your own kind of rule and adjust things as you go. So, yeah, I think that's the cool thing about D&D, and the cool thing about role playing, if you're into that, a flexible enough system, is being able to think on the fly, change a rule if you need to, make it fit your character, your campaign, your setting, your specific instance of play. And I think that's probably where D&D is one of the better systems, because it can do that. And yeah, what's broken in D&D? Well, so what? If it doesn't make sense to you, don't play it that way.
Or maybe you're in a world that thing can't happen.
Right, exactly. Well, that was Spelljammer. You know, there's so many things in Spelljammer where you could create a world that did anything. You could create a world that reacted like rubber every time you stepped on the ground, and everybody bounced 4 feet.
Gosh, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's the history is because, like, the reins were off back then.
Oh yeah,
you know,
and to some degree they are now if you're creative.
I just don't know. So and this is where I go back to kind of closing that circle on the Critical Role thing, and maybe I am harshly and unfairly judging the Critical Role group because of this, just because of my experience of the past couple of years. But I've found that the players, that they're so attached to the rules, right? That it's like, I'm literally sitting in a game, right? I'm sitting in a game with you. You're saying something as a DM. I'm watching another player do a thing, and I'm going, why are we doing this? This makes no sense to be this wrapped around this one rule for what the consequence of the effect is on the overall campaign and game is right now. Like, why are we even checking this thing? It's completely irrelevant. It's just because it's a rule in the rule book, you're deciding to use it. It's like, and again, I think we're probably just reinforcing our own biases. At least I am right now, of because of my experiences in D&D and second edition specifically. but like encumbrance. It was like a core rule.
Oh yeah,
in second edition, but like who used it?
Who used it?
Nobody used it because there's like that's way too like tracking your rations.
Why would you do it?
Maybe,
yeah, maybe.
You know, like arrows, same thing. Like
weather.
Yeah, I was playing a game where someone was like, "Are you tracking your arrows?" And I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yeah, you need to roll to see how many you get back at the end of your combat." I'm like, "Wow, I haven't done that in like 20
it's been a long time,
years."
right,
Like, I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'll do that." You know, like
I mean, I can see that if you really want to be a stickler, or
sure.
you want to resource limit something, fine,
absolutely fine.
But
I've done that. Yeah, usually with something magical where it's like there's 4 of these. You know,
and that's one of the fascinating things about Dragonlance is in a lot of D&D worlds campaign settings, you can't walk around the corner without stumbling on a magic sword or a magic ring or something. Not that much in Dragonlance.
Yeah,
I mean, really, not that much. Magic's much more rare.
So I always liked that.
I
always liked magical items as a resource. And I 100%. I had to move away from that because much of my DMing career, that's how I treated magical items. And I found out later on that I was running, and this is like a whole new generation of gamers I was playing with. Like they wanted to be able to go into the magic shop and buy the magic weapon. Right. And I was always like, there are no magic shops. They're not that common. People aren't just over there just smithing out +2 magic swords. Right. Like, but like the era of like video games and things had changed the aura around magic in an environment. You know?
And a character can be an enchanter now.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can make your own.
Yeah. You got enough resources. You can do it.
Absolutely. But I think the way I handle a lot of that stuff is, okay, fine. Make it costly.
Mm-hmm.
Or make it that you're going to have a special ingredient, or that you're going to have to, I mean, there's ways I think to handle it quite well and still not let yourself overpower the game. I mean, I love creating weird magic items myself.
I love it. Yeah.
I think just fascinating magic items. But what I do is I limit it to one use or 2 uses or something like that. And then, one of the worst things I ever did was gave a character just as a joke. It was for a Christmas one shot that we were doing.
Is it Vorpal Spoon?
No. It was, so I created a bunch of sort of themed, monsters as well as rewards.
Yeah.
Basically a Santa-esque character came in at the end and let them draw something out of a sack, which I had a whole list of, they just rolled.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave one of them, it was a miniature tree with little lights and twinkling stuff. And but if they threw it on the ground, it would grow into a 40-foot tree. And they've used that thing so much because I didn't limit the number of uses. I should have, but I didn't limit. I limited it once a day, but that was it. And that character has continually been, because they're a tabaxi, so they're tree, cat tree thing. And they have done that. They've used it so much.
And that's a magical item trait, like an in-game rule that I think we've definitely seen shift over the years. Because back in the day, it used to be like, here's your wand, it has 10 charges, and then it's done.
Yep, and then it's done. Or you had to go get it recharged, and you had to pay a bunch
of money to do it. And now it's just like, you can use it 3 times a day. Like it's just like, it's more like, it's fine. You can just do that as much as you want.
Well, I think that's that shift in the original gaming, being a common man centric to hero centric gaming system, how it's changed. I think in the common man version, magic wasn't super incredibly common.
Yeah.
And it was potent and powerful, not always. And at lower levels you could manage it was a +1 to stuff and pretty limited. To where now, gosh, you find things right away. And
it's balanced that way, though, I feel like a lot of times, because the expectation, and that's why I had to change the way that I was DMing, because as I experienced it in 3.5, but then when 5th edition rolled around, I definitely was like, I have to change the way I DM, because the system was built around the expectation that you had X amount of magical items by a certain level. Right. So by like level 5, you're supposed to have, I don't know, like 5 magical items or something like that. And the creatures you're encountering were built around that. And while I've always liked to make things more challenging for people and there to be a risk for activities, I didn't want it to just be oppressive, right?
100%. I think that was one of the adjustments I had to make too, was how powerful characters are.
Yeah.
You could, and so when you're looking at monsters and encounters in the old days of 2nd edition, encounters that I had set up would have just overwhelmed a party.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 5th edition, they just crushed them. And I was like, oh boy. So the moment I shifted over to 5th edition, And I've now gone back and figured out a way to transfer a lot of my second edition older characters that I had, because I like them and I love them and I spent a lot of time building them, and moved them to fifth, with appropriate level ups and, you know, things like that. And so I think that's one of the things was that I had to think about, was how to make encounters tougher. And I think that's one thing that I'll give, and you know, again, back to your point about Critical Role, I'll give credit to them a little bit, because it's really hard to kill a D&D character nowadays. You've got resurrection spells, you've got a lot of stuff in your arsenal, but you can successfully knock one down. And there's a couple of times in campaigns where in Critical Role where they've done that, and that's hard to do in a game where you're playing with your friends and all that stuff. It's hard to kill a character.
Yeah.
And yeah, I used to be way more ruthless about it than I am now, but yeah, I still want it to be challenging, but not overwhelming. And it was harder for me originally when I started with 5th edition to balance that correctly.
100%. Yeah.
Because I thought I was getting things that were way too easy at first. And then it got better as you get more experience in a system. You know, you do get better with that stuff. But yeah, some of the older monsters that used to be challenging at lower levels were no longer a challenge at all.
Yeah, kind of a joke.
Yeah.
So the running joke of you always got to fight the kobolds first at level 1, right?
Right, yeah.
And that's not so much anymore.
You know, that's funny, because I remember the first years and years ago, there was a DOS-based Baldur's Gate game. You know, and now, of course, Baldur's Gate is Baldur's Gate. It's a great game. But yeah, there was an old Baldur's Gate game way back when. I think it was DOS-based. Maybe it was Windows-based, but I don't think so.
I mean, it was just like text-based, right?
I think so. I think it was just text-based. Yeah. And
might have some ASCII art or
and
something.
yeah, you know, you start out by fighting kobolds and those kinds of things, and because they were first level monsters, and you fight those and skeletons, and then you move up to more challenging things. But gosh, yeah, now and as you say, in the video game world nowadays, I mean, yeah, sure, you start out with lower power stuff initially as you gain, but it's not long before you're.
All right, so rapid fire questions before we wrap up here.
All right.
How many TPKs have you been a part of? Wait, as a player or as a DM? Okay.
As a player, one. I have come close as a DM, but it was my choice not to.
Okay.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
To be honest, and in this case, it was triggered accidentally. For one thing, it was a trap, and they had several opportunities to avoid it and did not do it because they weren't playing very smartly. And this is a group of experienced players too that I was playing with, and they just were more interested in their personal interaction and just missed it. You know, several times, and they never told me that they wanted to look for something. So they tripped a wire and they got slammed. And as they were running from something, they tripped another trap that alerted some other monsters. And so I was like, oh boy. And I reduced the number of monsters responding to that second one so it wouldn't kill them all. They lost a couple of party members though, and so they did have to spend some serious money resurrecting them. They weren't happy completely with me about that.
You're a benevolent overlord.
But I mean, it could have been a wipeout, and I've only been in one, and it was kind of a similar situation. It was where we as players did not clue in when the DM was telling us things, weren't listening. We were more joking around with each other, and the whole dungeon collapsed and ceiling fell on us, and
that was it.
Squished. Yeah, that was it. Game over.
No lucky teleportation circle.
No, he did give us some saving throws, but everyone failed them.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes they get you.
The
dice rolls will get you. Yeah. I think 2 for me as well. So that means I'm a fair on point. So that's good. How do you handle your initiative as a DM?
I've changed that over the years. I used to do party initiative just because I thought it was interesting, but now I have an initiative tracker that I built, which is a sort of a sword in a stone kind of thing with magnets, and I will roll everybody. I'll roll separately for monsters, usually myself, allies and foes, and I'll have them all on a tracker so I can spin them around. So I do individual initiative nowadays.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, I used to do group because I thought it made it simpler. I thought it made it easier to move the battle along. But then I realized that I was robbing characters of the ability to play off something, because I would let it, their roles be within the party. So when the party's turn, whoever's highest was the first, and then second, third, whatever. I realized that it wasn't allowing the characters to respond to the situation. So that's why I like to do the individual now and track it. Which in a big party gets really cumbersome sometimes, but
if I'm playing large parties, so I'll do basically table initiative where we roll for it. Whoever gets the highest one, that group gets to go. And if that is the players, then it's just who got the highest, you did, and we start that person, and we just go around from from directly around in a circle.
Yeah, and
then if it comes to me, then monsters go, and then we finish out the circle to the next person, right?
That's
and
a good
we'll
way.
Start again.
Another good way of doing
it expedites the tracking and the administration on like a larger table. But if you're playing with like 3 or 4 people, you don't need to do that.
You don't need to do that.
It's much more cinematic to be able to do it on an individual basis.
Yeah. And I've done it. If they're getting attacked by a horde, obviously that's going to be one initiative roll. It's not.
I was about to ask you, if you have loads, do you do like groups? Do you do just one single? Like, how do you?
That really depends on the situation. Like if I think they're going to attack as a front, then I'm going to do it as one roll. But if I think they're going to split up the monsters I'm talking about, if they're going to split up and attack different characters, then I will roll that as the 5 that are attacking you are going to go, then the 4 that are
break
attacking
them up into subgroups.
I'll break them up into subgroups. Again, trying to get through it a little quicker sometimes.
Was favorite gaming experience as a player?
Favorite gaming experience as a player? Boy, gosh, there's so many. Probably, and this is fascinating, but this is a 2nd edition. I was playing with I wanted to be a bard, and the DM said, "All right, you can be a bard, but you're going to have to come up with songs and poetry and things that you're going to be asked to play."
We'll make you actually do it.
Yeah, we're going to make you do this. So I had, one of my favorites, and that had people rolling on the floor, was I came up with a song called "Heave a Dead Drow." And that's we were fighting drows, and we were using a drow's body to test the floor, because there were portions of the floor that were falling away. So we tied a rope around a dead drow and threw it to test the floor. And so that became the song the next time we played, was "Heave a Dead Drow, me laddies, heave a dead drow, me boys." The lyrics were funny, and it was just, but it made me be more creative with that character than I would have ever been. And I got to where, because originally I was like, oh my God, I'm going to hate this. I can't stay that. But then I got to where I really enjoyed coming up with stuff.
I had a character where I played a Tengu, so he's a crow,
humanoid, right?
Yeah, Tengu. That had been imprisoned by a demon, but he only spoke in song lyrics because his voice, his normal voice had been taken. So I only used modern song lyrics in game, which was hysterical.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
I think my best story, my best gaming experience was, a buddy of mine, he was actually DMing for the first time, like a full campaign for us. We had a group, and we'd been playing consistently for, I don't know, years at that point together. And the players, so because I had typically been the DM most of the time, and my other friend would DM, and we used to alternate sessions or campaigns. And then this guy was like, "Hey, I want to do a run," and I was like, "All right, excellent." And still one of my favorite runs we've ever did. And what we did when we were doing the session 0 character build was everyone was like asking typical questions like, "Oh, what are you going to play? What are you going to play? Blah, 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 blah." And people were back and forth on things. And I was like, "Hey, I got an idea, guys. What if we're all related?"
Oh, fascinating.
Because
I'd love that.
Because I wanted to play, my initial was like, "Hey, let's all play mages, or let's all play thieves. Like, let's all do the same class to like put ourselves on off like the back leg, so it'd be harder for us, to like do like that, like symmetrical, like, hey, we're all going to do the same thing kind of thing, and find that as a story beat." And then it became, okay, well, what if we just we're related? And that took off. So we all became some version of elf, half elf, full elf, wood elf, savage elf, whatever.
Yeah.
And
the backstories there could be amazing.
Well, it was because we didn't know.
Oh, that's great. That's
so there's two.
Better.
There was 2 of us that were like, we knew we were related. We were the siblings of the father and the mother, right? And then we all received it. The way the DM ended up hooking it was great. We all received these letters to meet at this place from our father. And so we all meet up, and we're all like, "Who the fuck are you?" And we're like, "Well, I'm so and so. I'm so and so's son." And you're like, "No, I'm so and so's son." I like bullshit.
Yeah,
right?
Where are you from?
And it was super fun because one, we as individuals were all extremely close, so we had a great dynamic,
Right.
And so then we became siblings, and it was, I mean, there were tears in that campaign because someone sacrificed themselves for somebody else, and there were all these inside jokes about like our dad's like frivolous nature, and then there was like anger because of other things with the relationships from parents and stuff, and being left out. The role playing beats, like there were moments when like the DM was just sitting there silently, and we were going back and forth in these totally spontaneous, like passion filled moments of like hurt and stuff.
Happens.
Like it was, oh my God, it was.
I love when that happens. But then again, there you are back to your point about Critical Role. You have a fun campaign that you're playing off, and then the DM's not pushing the game along though.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, although my own bias was, he did push the campaign along. Just because we had good role-playing beats didn't mean the campaign got pushed. Right. Pacing was good.
Okay.
I've just had some recent bad experiences with slow pacing.
And I'm not a super Critical Role fanboy either. I just don't. I just think in that case, I don't know that they always get the credit. I think a lot of experienced gamers are really just. It's easy to say, well, we're just as good as they are. And you probably
You're not professional voice actors in production.
Yeah, but we're not. We don't have the production. We don't have the voice actors. And sure, you could have done it, but you didn't.
Yeah,
they did. You can't beat them up for that. I mean, that's just the way it is. They've been very, very successful.
And I appreciate the pushback. Favorite character class is the Bard.
Ooh, but my favorite character classes. Yeah, probably Bard, because they're a dabbler. They can do a lot of different things, and then they're kind of can be a swashbuckling. But I've tended to play. I've played a lot, and it's probably just because I've often been the more experienced player. So I've just said, you guys pick what you want to play. I'll fill out the party.
Yeah,
and so I've ended up playing cleric a good bit. I've ended up playing wizard a good bit. Yeah, bards are probably my favorite. I'm thinking about it. I don't know that I've ever played a straight fighter.
That would be amazing. The amount of time you've been playing.
I've been playing since the 70s, and I have never played. I don't think I've ever played a generic. That's incredible. Fighter. Well, maybe in the 1970s and those really early campaigns as a kid that I don't really remember that well. Yeah, I don't think I've ever played just a straight fighter. I've always played either multi-class, like a fighter thief, or something along those lines, or a bard, or I don't think I've ever played a straight up fighter.
Interesting. I don't know if I have. I'm sure I probably have at some point.
I mean, the character I'm kind of running now in a campaign is a cleric, and it's because everybody else wanted to do other things, and I was like, well, we need a cleric in this party, so I end up playing the traditional dwarven cleric, right?
I love him. Ranger would definitely be mine. What's your least favorite character class?
Least favorite character class. I don't super enjoy playing clerics, so I have to make that character fun for me. And I have done that with this particular character because he's quirky. He's got a lot of side, interests and things like that. So he worships a weird god, and that. So I've got to do it. I haven't always been super fun. And part of the reason I think is the current rules for clerics. They're fine up until a certain point, and then they are seriously underpowered, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I think the character class, as a general rule, is underutilized and underpowered, and it may be because nobody wants to be the healer. Nobody wants to be the guy who's patching everybody up all the time, because it does limit what magic you can take. It limits what you can do, and that's kind of the new thing with clerics too, because it used to be that any spell you had in your arsenal
was yours. Yeah. So it made them so different.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was the big difference between them and a magic user. It wasn't that you had to have these spells prepared. Your god gave you the spell. So therefore, if you wanted that spell, you could use it. I don't know why that change was made. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I wonder if it was to balance it or draw a delineation between like the warlock, because I know it was the warlock. Yeah, it's the warlock, right? Who had sorcerer? No, sorcerer.
Sorcerer,
who just cast a smaller set. Because that was my beef with the sorcerer when they brought the sorcerer in. Was like you're basically taking what makes a cleric unique, which is a pool of spells that you can just cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and giving it to a magic user with a limited spell selection, which I just felt like was kind of like stripping the value off a cleric.
Yeah, and I think that's and it makes sense because magic users had to memorize and had to do all that stuff. So there was some basis behind it.
Clerics would be mine too. I think.
Yeah.
If I ever needed to play something that was in that genre, I always leaned on a druid. I'd play a druid instead.
Yeah, druid.
It was just more compelling than a cleric for me for some reason.
More interesting characters generally. Yeah.
What's your favorite die?
Oh, my favorite die.
And just out of the polyhedrals. Don't do something weird like a 30-sided because those.
No. The common ones. It's funny. It probably has to do with the fact that I have one die that I really like, and it's a D12.
Oh man, the D12 does not get enough love.
They don't, because hardly anything uses it.
Yep.
And I had a character once that for damage on a weapon rolled a D12.
Yep.
And that I have one particular D12 that rolls incredibly well, and so it's just been one of those things. I miss using that die because I think it rolls so well, and so I never get to use it because I never have anything that needs a D12.
There's a game by an indie game company called from Snarling Badger who makes it. It's called Space Station Zero. It's a solo co-op like skirmishy kind of narrative campaign game, and they only use D12s in there. And I got so excited when I found that out, and then I had to go find like a set of like 10 D12s. Because my OCD demanded I had a matching set of D12s for it. Gosh. And that was very difficult to find.
It is. It's tough to find D12s.
And I was like, hey, the D12 don't get enough love. I think my favorite is the D4 because it's a human caltrop and you can use it. Come the zombie apocalypse, even zombies will stumble on a bunch of D4s scattered around.
Yeah.
It's the one you always know when you find it because it hurts.
Yep.
All right, so last question, because I appreciate your time. You're going into a dungeon. What 3 things are you taking with you?
What 3 things am I taking?
Things, not people, but things.
A healing potion if I've got one.
You've got one. That's
100%.
Yep. Gotta have one of those.
Taking that. You're going to limit me to character class or
no? Just anything you have at your smorgasbord.
Yep. I'm taking my favorite weapon, which has always been a battle axe.
Hell yeah!
Love a battle axe.
Single or double bladed?
Typically doubles,
as it should be,
or Warhammer, depending. Because I played, if you're a cleric, I love a Warhammer now.
Warhammer, yeah.
If you got to have a blunt weapon, you gotta go that way. Love those. I never liked traditional swords. Swords are fine, but they always seemed a little boring when you could pick from all these other weird. Which is one of the loves of Oriental Adventures, right? Is the weird weapons.
Weird weapons, they're great.
I mean, I had a weapon called a Laja Tang, which I remember enjoying a lot. So probably that. So obviously you're going to take a weapon, you can take a healing potion, probably some source of light or fire.
Okay, I was wondering if you're going to go with that or if you're going to be like, I have night vision, it's fine. Dark vision.
No. I mean, you can do that, but I still think you need fire because there's a lot of creatures that respond to like spiders and things like that you can use fire with. So something like a torch is helpful even if you don't have even if you can see. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Right. You heard it here, folks. Take your weapon, take your fire, take your healing potions, and you too will come out the back end.
Yep.
Whit, I appreciate taking time with me, buddy.
Absolutely.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
We'll do this again. And then we'll do I'll let you know when we actually do it. I will warn you, anything you say may also end up in an outtake.
That's
I usually have Easter eggs at the end of all the episodes.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it's usually somebody saying something really silly. So, check. Give me a hard check.
Check.
Excellent. All right. I was having problems with noise gating last time I was doing this. Take a sip of Nectar of the Gods. Hopefully no one has a wild aversion to slurping. There's a coffee guy, James Hoffman. Have you ever seen any of his videos?
I don't think I've ever seen his videos. Okay. I've heard of who he is.
Yeah, so he's like a big coffee guy, and he has it's actually funny we're talking about this because I was just interviewing my buddy the other day and we were talking about coffee and Magic the Gathering. He has like a warning, like a trigger warning, because he slurps all the time because he's always tasting coffee in a sipping spoon because he's a sipping spoon. Yep. And apparently it drives a lot of people totally batty and crazy and they hate it.
Well, there's actually a condition called misophonia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So funny thing is, I used to work with someone who had that, and I didn't know it until I was whistling coming down the hallway near their office, and they stuck their head out, and they're like, "Shut the fuck up!" And I was like, "They're having a bad day." And then they were like, "No, do you know what misophonia is?" And I was like, "No, I don't." So I got educated.
Yeah.
But apparently, my buddy was just telling me that what he does now, what James Hoffman does, is he has the slurping and the non-slurping audio tracks on YouTube, so you can. You don't have to try and like keep muting it, right?
Yeah.
Like and turning it down. You can just
That's pretty good.
Let it go.
Yeah, it's funny. Oops, I think we're.
Are you syncing?
I think we're syncing.
I'll get that. That's not surprising.
As I look over and I notice that the microphone's around my waist.
Is that where you normally talk from?
Yeah, exactly. My belly button. That's
seems.
Right. Yeah. But it's interesting you're mentioning Magic the Gathering, because when Magic sort of restarted back a while, I realized that my wife and I, we had a yard sale and we sold all of our Magic the Gathering cards, which was quite a lot, to a kid from the neighborhood for, like $5 or something. And years later, I discovered we had actually a couple of rare cards that would now be worth a lot of money. Yeah,
I did the same thing, man. I've downsized so many times over the years.
Yeah,
and I, as you well know, and I got rid of a lot of things over the years that I've regretted. And it always pains me when I talk to people about Magic cards, and I tell them I was like, yeah, I had a beta IC manipulator, and they're always like, it's like a $60,000. I mean,
yes, we know.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for telling me. Appreciate that. That's the bottom of a dump somewhere.
Yeah. Well,
like an idiot.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could have never known, I don't think,
right.
The value of stuff. And it's like why, I guess we'll talk about it. So Whit, thanks for joining me, by the way. I appreciate you.
Thanks, John.
Come on and hang out and talk. But to that point that we were just talking about, which the listeners will not know about unless they find an Easter egg.